I again had this feeling that still too often it is seen as a minor offense, as something, don't bother even, and this is something that I have encountered over and over again in the years, that when I was calling out sexist hate speech, when I was calling out sexist comments or remarks, I was told again and again, well, it's just a joke, or it's a compliment, or, it's just a stupid comment from a guy who's lonely. Why do you even bother about it? And I think that this is part of the problem, because whenever we deny an arena for having a political debate about these issues, we are not the problem. We are doing the exact opposite. We are making the problem worse. And I wanted to say two things about adding to also the definition that you have given of hate speech and sexism. I think the first one is, and this is very important for me, that it has a political aim. Very often when we talk about sexist hate speech, we have the feeling that, these are some guys who might not, have girlfriends, or who might have a problem with themselves. And that's why they're doing this as some kind of ventil. But in the end, sexist hate speech is being used aggressively in order to intimidate and discredit women in the political sphere. Mm-hmm. And that is why we need to also tackle it politically, because otherwise we are basically accepting that women are pushed out of this area. And the second point is, and I think that's very often relativated or not seen, we very often believe that people who are posting these kind of comments online, who are repeatedly trolling female politicians or other women who are in the public eye, they're lone wolves. So they are these lonely guys who, just don't know what to do with their times or whatever. But I think we need to recognize that these groups are very often very organized. So I have had encounters, for example, with situations where posts that I had done on Facebook or Twitter were shared in platforms or fora on the internet, different, also Facebook, but also different websites, different chat rooms, where they organize themselves in order to flood sexist hate speech on me. And I think when you take that into consideration, you also see that this is a structural problem. This is not an individual problem of the woman or the person affected, be tackled also on a structural level and on a political level.
So it's thank you for that very thorough overview. And I hear a lot of concerns with what you're saying, and stating the facts resembles very much of what we also discussed in the hate speech course, the Facing Facts Online hate speech course, about overlapping it with different sort of discrimination, and also the mob culture and the echo chamber that can be created. And you mentioned that in your experience, sexist hate speech always has a political aim, and it has to be tackled politically. And I think that also brings us to your work, because you're in a position to also work on these issues. So not just experience it as a person, maybe feeling powerless, but you are in the position of initiating change. So I'm wondering, if you can tell us a bit more about what you do on a daily basis, what the FEM committee is about, how does the European Parliament approaches this issue, what is your experience, also not just professionally, but personally being in the European Parliament, where the majority of MEPs are men. So if you can also a bit address all these for us.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Maybe I can differentiate two different parts here. And the first one is really the political debate that is happening inside of the European Parliament. And the other one is a little bit the question, what kind of legislation can we actually do from the European level in order to counter sexist hate speech? And maybe I will start with the European Parliament itself. Maybe some of you have followed this case of Janusz Korwin-Mikke. He's not a member of the parliament anymore, a Polish member of the European Parliament. And he said in the plenary, so on stage in the parliamentary exchange, he made a statement about women being less intelligent, women being less strong, and that is why this was on the Equal Pay Day. And this is why women also deserve to be paid less money. And this created quite an outrage, and Korwin-Mikke was after that sanctioned by the president of the parliament. And there are different ways to sanction MEPs. You have to give up a certain amount of daily allowances. He wasn't allowed to go on delegations anymore, things like this. He sued against this in front of the ECJ, so the European Court of Justice. And actually, he was acquitted. So it was said that on the basis of the internal rules of procedure in the European Parliament, what he had said was not to be reprimanded, or it was not to be sanctioned. It falls under freedom of speech of a parliamentarian. Now, first of all, what he said stays outrageous no matter how this discussion developed then. But it also outlined a very important problem that we still have, that the ECJ basically made us aware of, that still in the internal rules of procedure, you have sanctioning for racist hate speech, for example, but you don't have sanctioning for sexist hate speech. And I think that this is something that we very urgently have to change. And this case is just one of the examples where MEPs have, from my point of view, said things which are not acceptable in a political debate, and that should be sanctioned or should be reprimanded in some way. So this is something that the European Parliament has to do in order to create a debate where really everybody can take part on equal basis. Now, when we talk about legislation, I would say there is still a lot to do, and we have really been trying to, in the last years, to push for steps forward. And I would like to mention two initiatives that especially the FAM committee has taken. And the first one was the discussion around the Istanbul Convention, which is a convention to fight gender-based violence. And of course, sexist hate speech and sexist hate crime fall into this broader discussion around the question of gender-based violence. And the FAM committee has really pushed all the member states to ratify the Istanbul Convention. Still not all member states of the European Union have ratified it. Especially the situation in Bulgaria is very, very concerning when it comes to the ratification. But also to have the European Union join the Istanbul Convention, so that the European Union takes a step in order to fight against gender-based violence, also including, for example, hate speech and hate crime. And what we would like to have from this is a directive against gender-based violence on European level. And also questions such as how can we create a societal discourse? How can we create a media, a virtual discussion space where sexism is not accepted, should be a very important part of this debate. And the second point, because I myself worked on this a lot, because I had experienced sexist hate speech a lot, I felt that we also need to bring this forward, specifically looking at the question of the digital revolution that is coming ahead, because obviously sexist hate speech existed before the internet. But still the internet has created a space, sometimes a much louder space, for some people to intimidate people, to scare people off. And that's why I wrote a report in the European Parliament on empowering women in the digital age. And of course, we looked at sexist hate speech and what kind of legal changes should be made. Also, you were speaking about, Melissa, the better training, for example, of police, of the judiciary. But on the other hand, what we also wanted to show is that in order to fight against sexism and sexist hate speech, we need to take a positive approach. So we need to exactly have these kind of platforms where we discuss this. We need to have a very vocal civil society that speaks about this and that gives guidelines how we can fight against this together. Because in the end, the internet is a wonderful space where we can exchange, like this across borders from all over the world. And we should use this. And I think that this is also a very important message. Don't be intimidated. Don't get scared from these kind of events. This is not something individual. This is a structural problem, and we will also have to fight this together.
I really hear again resemblance to how we also approach hate speech and all the hate in society, and how we at CEJI try to put really positive measures when negative forces are taking place around us. So it's very much in line with how we approach all these issues. One of the things that I've been thinking as you were telling about your professional experience, also just to sway back a bit to more personal, because you mentioned the online sphere really amplifying all the hatred. Because in the course we offer a framework of choices to participants, that there are plenty of things that you can do to tackle or to stand up against hatred online. You can engage in counter speech. You can also do some monitoring when you just collect data. It's just as important to collect data and to really be able to know the size of the problem and measure what's happening in society. So there's plenty of things that you can do. You can also just report and have content removed if it's really illegal hate speech and if it's really abhorrent. So there are plenty of things that you can do. And I'm wondering, when it comes to your social media presence, because I've seen it on Facebook, you have a very, very nice moderation policy in the About section, but you're also present on Twitter. You have plenty of followers on both platforms. So what kind of approach do you take, or your team takes, or how do you respond? Have you ever engaged in counter speech, or what's your best recipe on that?
What's your strategy?
Yes, that's the more accurate word.
I would say we don't have like one size fits all strategy to deal with it. I mean, certainly if there are things like if there are threats, for example, rape threats, death threats, things like that, we pass it over to the police because this is something that they'll have to deal with. But of course, there is I would say, gray area between, I'm going to rape you and you are ugly because of your teeth or something like that. So what we have been using much more, also to really make a very clear statement, and I think that this is what you've seen on my Facebook page as well, to clarify that if there is content that is derogatory, if there is content that is racist or sexist or insulting, we take it down. We really delete, because I don't want my Facebook page or my Twitter or any other place where, I give my name to be a platform to spread hatred. And that's something that we have made very clear. I think in the beginning, when I became an MEP, I was much more hesitant to take down things because I felt like, this is like a democratic exchange. But no, I have taken a very, very strong stance here. If it's hateful, if it's insulting, I take it down. That's just how it is. And then what I have been doing much more is also to try to make points and to share certain experiences. And as you might know, last year in September, I shared a personal experience about sexual harassment that I had. And some of the responses that I got were, I think, very stereotypical responses that women get when they talk about experiences with sexualized violence or sexual harassment. So I had guys telling me that, it was a migrant for sure. I had guys telling me that what I'm saying is not true. I had guys telling me that I'm too ugly or too pretty to be sexually harassed. So all of these kind of responses I got as well. And I wanted to make a political issue out of this, because I feel that the sexism that I'm facing should be something that also broader circles should know about. So I screenshotted a lot of these messages and then I shared them on different platforms. Because for me, when for the first time I was facing these kind of attacks, I felt that this is something that I'm alone with, that I get because maybe I am ugly or because maybe whatever. And when I then read many other women sharing the same experiences, to me, this was already a very, very empowering situation. So I'm also trying to kind of use the hate speech that I'm getting in order to empower other people, to tell them, you are not alone with this. This is not about you. Don't make this about you. Don't be intimidated by it. We need to tackle this together.
Yeah, but I think it's, one of the main issues, about hate speech in general, but also about sexism. I think specifically for sexist hate speech is the social acceptance, of certain forms of sexist hate speech, which is not only spread among those who perpetrate this kind of hate speech, but also among the victims, those who are the target of this hate speech. So I think that here we are giving an important message about empowering, that there is something that can be done, and solidarity among, other women, but, among different groups. I think it's key. And of course, I mean, social networks are also amplifying, all of this. But I don't think that this is something that came with social networks. I mean, it's something that is,
Yes,
it has been there. Yeah. And if I can add one more point, because I think what you're saying is very important, something that has worked for me a lot when I'm tweeting something or posting something that I know will create this kind of hate speech, backlash, whatever, and I'm already telling certain people beforehand. So I myself am posting it in groups and say, look, this is probably going to create a lot of comments. So if you could jump in there and also make a comment, tell other people not to insult each other and so on and so on. And for me, this has been, on the one hand, of course, very instrumental in terms of then you don't only have these horrible comments, but also in terms of creating a group of people that kind of stands beside you or around you when you are under this attack. And I think that this is something that we should do much more, because as I said, the trolls, the sexists, they are organized. We should also get organized and do exactly these kind of things.
That's a really, really, really useful technique, I think. And it's also taking their strength and using it or turning it into our strength as well. Just one quick note for participants that we have around 15 minutes left. So if you want to ask any questions or if you've had any thoughts that you want to share, now is the time to flood the chat function, the chat room with all the questions, because we'll be going along and asking a bit more from Terry, but you can also ask, so feel free to use the chat function. I have a question on my mind.
Yeah, me too, but maybe
it's
the same. I don't know.
You start.
Well, we were wondering, if the hate, we are actually questioning also ourselves a lot about, the nature of hate. Is the hate a symptom or the disease? The hate speech is, it seems like that hate speech is the final stage of something that can much far away, that's coming far away, and I think that part of also our role as NGO involved in informal education. I mean, we really believe that education is one of the responses to that, and I think that. Either if hate speech is the symptom or the disease, I think that with education we can do something about. And we were wondering, also the European Parliament, how can, tackle, the very real nature of the hate that's spread in society.
Well, maybe just to give you one very practical example that we were saying in the report on the digital empowerment of women, or the digital empowerment basically of the whole society, was exactly to use education, because one of the problems, at least this is my impression, that a lot of the people who would, for example, insult me or write very sexist comments under my Facebook post would never do anything like that in the real world. So they wouldn't come up to me after a debate that I've been into and tell me you are fat and ugly, shut up. And so I think that using tools that we certainly haven't used before, because this is a group of people that grew up in an age where the internet basically either didn't exist or it wasn't as present as it is today. So I think that now when we talk about digital literacy, it's not only about knowing how to code, it's also about knowing how to create a democratic arena also on the internet. And I think that this is something that has to be discussed in schools much more often, that needs to be in all curricula all over the European Union. But additionally to that, I think what the European Parliament or what the European level can actually do, I mean, there is now this huge amount of money that are being invested in technological changes, in supporting SMEs and startups, and basically seeing the whole question of the digital revolution as something that is very technology driven, which it is obviously, but it's also a complete change of how our democracy works, how our social interaction work. I mean, dating 10 years ago and dating today are two completely different things. Mm-hmm. So I think that at least a part of this money also has to be used to support civil society initiatives that are working on this, and also to maybe give more awareness raising to people who, are not in educational institutions anymore nowadays about the situation. Because if we are not careful about this, and I'm not only talking about sexist hate speech here, I mean, if you look at examples like Brexit, for example, where it's been proven that the Leave campaign has been using social media also to manipulate people. So if we are not careful about this development of polarization, spreading hatred, spreading division, will make our democracies as we know them impossible to function. Mm-hmm. So I think that looking at this and providing funding, providing possibilities to counter these kind of developments would be absolutely crucial and actually integral to create a digitalization that will work in the societies that we want to live in.
Yeah, if I can just really second that fully and 100%, this is also what we're saying under Media Literacy, is that we have to teach people how to responsibly consume and produce content online, because now it's always also something that we are all enabled to do. But I think we'll have to go with some questions
we have
from
some
the audience.
Questions. Yes, let's start from the first one. What is your experience with the police? How do they deal with the death threats or threats of rape? Does your complaint as a real consequence?
I think it's a very mixed picture. So I must admit, and I have been saying this before, I have only had very, very positive experiences with the police myself. But I've also heard, and this is something that I'm always saying as well, because I think that it's important, not to monopolize on my experiences. I hear over and over again, but there are also a lot of difficulties still. And this is why, and maybe to say that for me, this is absolutely key in what does this do to you? Because, I mean, okay, you are facing sexist hate speech, and then you report it to the police, or you are facing threats, you report it to the police. It can be, and this what it has been to me, a reassuring experience that you see that the police is reacting to this, the police is ready to do something about this, or it can be an even more traumatizing experience if you have the feeling that you are alone with this. So the questions of the institutional response to these kind of situations is very, very important. And what I have heard is that, and I cannot name it's this member state or this member state, I also think that there is a very mixed picture. But in general, there is still a lot of room to improve the situation. I have heard experiences, maybe just to give some examples, where people have been facing shitstorms, really sexist shitstorms, hundreds of people tweeting at them, hundreds of people posting under their Facebook posts, hundreds of people messaging them, and the police basically saying things like, yeah, but then don't use the internet anymore. And this is just, I mean, this is not really an option that most people want. And also, I think it's blaming the victim. I mean, it's making the victim taking responsibility for something that perpetrators are doing. So I believe it is very important to much better train police officers, but also then in the further progress to train the judiciary and to really make this something that our legal systems actually feel responsible for. Because a lot of the people that I have talked to that have had negative experiences said that, they didn't even have the impression that this is something that concerns our legal system, because the internet is a room where there is no law, where there is no right or wrong, where anything can happen. It's like the Wild West of social interaction. So they didn't even feel they had to do something. And I believe that that's very important, that we very clearly say that there is a responsibility, and that the responsibility, when it's taken, there have to be certain standards that the staff, different people follow.
We have other questions, so maybe I might ask you, Terry, to be a little bit shorter in your
Sorry.
answer. No, but that was completely fine. But I just want to make sure that everyone, deserves the answer that they asked for. I think there is another question, which is this one.
So what would be your advice to citizens wanting to organize something to fight sexist hate speech?
Sorry, there was a cutting. Would my advice be to citizens who want to organize against it?
Yes, to fight sexist hate speech, yeah.
Well, first of all, I would say do it. Because as I said, I have the feeling that, now it's already a little bit losing pace in the last month. And I think it's very important to keep that up. And I would say join initiatives, join groups where, first of all, you share experiences, but then also, and this is always very important for me, take a positive stance. So try to be constructive about certain things, and try to maybe also more creative than I have, try to find ways how to tackle this and how to create a commonness against these kind of incidents, against these kind of comments. Because for me, that was really what in the end made me keep going, instead of just, going back and basically being shut off from the discussion.
We have another question. The European Commission has recently signed a code of conduct with technology platforms or with the IT companies to counter hate speech online. Did the European Parliament and the FEM committee participated in the drafting of the code of conduct? And does it contain specific provision to contrast hate speech on a sexist base?
Oh, that's a very interesting point, because I believe that we have not been, as the Parliament, part of this discussion, and I would have to check if there was a specific part on sexism. But as I said, inside of the European Parliament, it is a struggle to have it, to have sexism falling under the hate speech umbrella, so to say. But I cannot answer this right away, but I could check and then let you know later on how also maybe this report that we have drafted 2 years ago has been taken into account.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's also important to note that in the Code of Conduct, they refer to the framework decision of 2008 on illegal hate speech. So it's very strictly just on public incitement to hatred or to violence. Right. While we, with Facing Facts, try to take a broader approach to really put the victim in the center and the potential harm that is caused by.
And the code of conduct, and I speak because there was something that Facing Facts, as civil society initiative, was involved in, is something that the European Commission lead on, and IT companies and member states are also involved, but there's still, I think, a lot of room for improvements. For instance, the inclusion also of the law enforcement, which is not yet included. So I think that the Code of Conduct is a significant step forward, but there is a long path ahead, I think.
Still to improve. And may I add one point, because I think that from a legislative side, especially when we talk about different grounds of discrimination, what is also important and what the Parliament has been pushing for 10 years now, we are in a very sad anniversary this year, is the Horizontal Equality Directive, because the European Union has actually been championing in non-discrimination policies some time way back, and now this directive has actually been blocked or not moved forward with in council for 10 years. And this would also be a very strong step because I work a lot on sexism, but all the different grounds of discrimination and people facing discrimination in society, I believe, are very important to take into consideration, not only in an employment context, but in all spheres of society. And this is where we need to do work, and this is where we are stuck at the moment. So I think it would be very important, especially also looking ahead at the campaign. We have an election next year for the European Parliament, to raise exactly these kind of points.
So I think we have a time for one more question. Obviously, there is a lot of interest, so definitely we'll come back to the thought of organizing another session. So I'll just take in chronological order. Alice from Italy is asking, saying that she doesn't really feel that people understand the gravity of sexist hate speech in her surroundings. They don't perceive the risks of it as much as she does. So what can she do, and what can we do to sensibilize them and make them aware of the problem?
I have a similar experience that sometimes I have the feeling that sexism is still seen as like, you know, the okay thing to do amongst like all forms of hate speech, or that, you know, it's just a joke, or don't take it so personally. And what I was trying is to really also talk about the effects that this has. So one of the things that, as I was mentioning, I was publicizing the hate speech that I had received, but I was also telling, and I think this is of course always a very personal thing, and I don't want to push anybody to talk about things that they don't want to talk about, but to make people aware of what this does to me as a person, and, you know, not as the politician, but as me, Terry, and how this affects the way that I feel comfortable talking about myself, that I feel comfortable talking about my work, that I feel comfortable in a certain environment. And I think that this was something that, at least in my surrounding, did have an effect. So that, for example, my parents, they are not very political, they are not very progressive politically. But when I talked to them about what this does to me and how this is also aimed at shutting people off and silencing people, I think they understood much better why it is so important to fight against it, and how this is actually not only something that, you know, benefits women like me, or, you know, people who are affected by sexist hate speech, but why this is important in order to live in a democratic society. And so maybe this is something like really telling personal stories about how this affects people's life, and how this is making an equal society at least much more difficult to reach, if not impossible.
Mm-hmm. That's a very, very nice, I have to say, closing thought, because we'll have to stop at this point. We scheduled to finish around this time. So, yeah, I would like to thank everyone for participating and for the questions that we will save and recycle somehow, and we'll definitely make use of it. Very big thank you to you, Terry, for joining us and sharing all these experience and everything. I would add, if you would like to learn more about hate speech, there is a Facebook Facts
and also hate
course.
Speech legislation, because I can see we couldn't answer a couple of questions on hate speech legislation, but we really invite you to sign up for the Facing Facts online hate speech course, because there are really interesting insights specifically on that regard, and the possibility to exchange with your peers in discussion forums so that you can actually learn more.
There's also a big section on safety, which I think is super relevant when we talk about sexist hate speech and how do we secure ourselves online while still participating in the online world. And
as a last kind of invitation, I really also recommend you to check the Parliamentary Rights EduKit that we developed together with OBC, because it's, I think, an interesting way to get to know the European institutions and their role in tackling discrimination. And I think that is also a nice opportunity to get a first idea of what civil society organization or civil society individuals can do to do something about sexist hate speech, but also other forms of hate that manifest in society. So I think that there are a lot of resources, educational resources out there. So we really invite you to make the best out of them.
And as a last notice, so this was the first session of a series. We'll be back for more webinars this fall. We might also continue this specific topic because I think there's a lot to cover. So thank you again. Thank you very much, Terry. Thank you, everyone. And we'll hope you will join also next time.